There's a boy inside every man who dreams of being a fighter pilot, of kitting up in a G-suit and screaming across the sky at supersonic speeds at the helm of a multi-million-dollar war machine. Well, this is where that fantasy becomes reality. It's called the combat zone.
Tourists with steel stomachs will fly through 6 decades of aviation history in anything from spruce and fabric biplanes to heavy metal jets.
Barry, tell me about the concept of combat zone.
Well, basically in Combat Zone, we're trying to take people on a trip through military aviation history from the 20s Tiger Moth biplane right the way through to the Denel Cheetah. So we're giving people an opportunity of experiencing those aircraft from literally every decade in the last century.
It's a world first, an experience unique to South Africa and one that requires no formal training or piloting know-how.
It was in a plane similar to this one that the first air-to-air combat took place, but not as you would imagine. These planes were used for reconnaissance by both the English and the Germans until one pilot took bricks with him on a sortie and threw them at enemy planes when they got too close. In fact, the first aeroplane downed in combat was shot down by a service pistol.
Difficulty in bailing out during an emergency was a pre-war design catalyst for the most famous biplane in the world, the much-loved Tiger Moth. The wing struts were moved forward for easier crisis exits, but that affected the plane's center of gravity, so a pilot flying solo would always occupy the rear cockpit.
Give us a bit of a history behind the Tiger Moth.
The Tiger Moth was designed to meet a Royal Air Force requirement before the Second World War for a basic trainer for the Royal Air Force. And the first prototype flew in 1931. So what you're seeing today is 1931 technology, down to the last nut and bolt. And they built something like 9,000 of them, and they probably trained at least 250,000 pilots in the Second World War.
Once you're strapped to the plane and have taken stock of your bearings, you realize that you're about to take off in a soapbox version of a modern aircraft. There are fewer dials in the cockpit than in a run-of-the-mill motor vehicle. But that's just what pilots love. Stick and rudder flying by the seat of your pants and the feeling in your gut.
Well, a Tiger Moth is bugs in the teeth, wind in the hair, rain in the face, the cold in winter, the warmth in summer, and an affinity with the air. You feel like a bird in this aeroplane.
Developed in Canada as a successor to the Tiger Moth, the Chipmunk saw Royal Air Force service from 1950 to 1992.
Chipmunk, I think, arguably is one of the nicest handling aeroplanes that there is available at Combat Zone. In aerobatics, it's absolute delight. Light controls, very responsive, and it's a great ride from that point of view.
Chippy, as the aircraft is fondly referred to, is rated at +10 and -6 Gs for maneuvers. Jargon which simply means this plane can really play in the air. The Yakovlev Yak-52, a light and agile aircraft, was the mainstay of the Soviet aerobatic and military training program. Besides flying loops, it had a few twists of its own.
A couple of crazy things about it, like it had a wood prop and the wheels don't go all the way in. So if you landed with the wheels up still, you just jack the aircraft up, put a new prop on and can fly again.
The Czech L-29 jet trainer saw service in the Warsaw Pact during the 1960s and 70s.
Most people never get a chance to fly in a subsonic fighter jet. How would you describe that sensation?
The sensation of flying this aircraft is one of absolute freedom. The sensation of having this incredible speed and climbing very, very high and looping it across the top. You get the sensation of being weightless and flying it across in any dimension you like. So it's not that you're flying in one plane, you're flying all 3 dimensions at the same time. And that's the sense of freedom you get.
The L-29 tops out at 650 k's per hour. Not bad for a 3.5-ton metal object denying gravity. But it's hard to judge speed so far above the ground. Naturally, when the Earth comes up to meet you or decides to spin around your cockpit, you're not thinking about velocity, but Vomit City. And for the pièce de résistance, the combat zone cadet will enter the inner sanctity of the true modern combat pilot when they strap into the battle-proven Cheetah D jet and break through the sound barrier at 1100 k's per hour. It's a flagship plane that requires extensive ground support.
You need only hang around the hangars at Denel for a little while to appreciate how much work goes into keeping an aircraft airborne. Did you know that for every hour the Cheetah flies, it requires 40 ground crew hours? I mean, that's a mind-blowing ratio. But still, when you're flying at supersonic speeds, it's a comforting fact.
Mike Weingarts has flown over 3,000 hours in the Cheetah and has spent more time at speeds of over Mach 1 than most other South African pilots.
As we are now, we're standing at 1G, but when you're flying supersonically, you experience so much more force on your body. That's where the G-suit comes into play, doesn't it?
The G-suit is plugged into the aircraft, and as you go into the turn or the aerobatic maneuver, it then fills the suit up with air, squeezing your calves, thighs and stomach, keeping as much of the blood as possible in the top part of your body.
Which is right where you want it, to keep you conscious and your mind alert.
Like, one side of me is saying, let's fire this baby up, but the other side is saying, just how safe is this?
Well, the aircraft itself is very safe, and if something does happen and we have to get out, you will be strapped into the ejection seat.
Mike, tell me a bit about the emotion of flying a machine at 1.6 Mach.
Well, you're normally fairly busy, especially keeping an eye on the fuel. The fuel consumption is very high. And yes, it is a thrill to be cruising around at those speeds and covering that sort of distance in such a short time.
Just how long would it take you to, say, fly from Johannesburg to Durban?
I think it's around about 10, 11 minutes or something from Johannesburg to Durban.
So your hair really does catch a light, huh?
That's, as you notice, I burn grey.
And the rest of us burn with envy. With a price tag of $14,000 for a trip through military aviation history, you gotta have the green stuff if you want to experience the right stuff.